Hello, esteemed viewers. You are all welcome to this time out on Kukuza Africa, where we are very passionate about the developmental issues of Sub-Sahara Africa and the entire African continent as a whole. And today we are delighted to have with us a very well accomplished, I will call, though a developmental expert, but I want to see her in the form of a developmental strategist and also as a social innovator, proponent in, quite, a number of countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. We are happy to have with us today Anatu Ben-Lawal. Anatu, you are welcome.
Thank you very much.
So this time out on Kukuza Africa.
Thank you.
And we quite appreciate the fact that you've come from Tamale to be with us for this program, and I know that you'll be going back up north shortly.
Thank you. Nice
having you here. Yeah. So Anatu, let's hear from you. I'm sure our viewers will be quite curious at this point to learn more about why I have referred to you as a developmental strategist, an expert, at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, my name is Anatu Ben-Lawal, as you mentioned, and I am a developmental strategist, as you described. I call myself a servant, really, of Africa, but this came about because of I found myself specializing in about 8 thematics, and understanding, since I was young, really trying to understand and grasp what were the issues with Africa. Why are we poor? Why are we behind the rest of the world? Why is healthcare the way it is? Why is development? Why are roads? Very practical things and questions that I had as a young girl. And we are good people, we're decent people. Historically, we've had some rough times, very, very rough times, as everybody knows. But I always wondered what this was, and so I was curious to find out, and found myself at quite a young age deciding to go into development. So I started off as a youth worker, but somehow managed to get myself. I've had one of those extraordinary lives where you find yourself in migration 1 minute, the next time you're in war zone rape, the next time you're in wash, the next time you're in nutrition, etc. And I didn't realize it at the time, but actually it was helping me build a career to be able to understand, because the issues are always integrated. It's never isolated on its own.
Right.
So all these issues that we have are compounded by certain fundamental challenges that we have as a people and as a continent, and by the way we do development. And then later on, I also began to see the lack of sustainability, which is also a problem in all the things, the projects that we do. When we look at civil society and NGOism, as we call it, so much has been poured into Africa, I think in the trillions. I think about 6-7 years ago, I wouldn't like to quote an exact figure. There was quite it's like I said, in the trillions that had been poured into Africa, and nothing to show for it. Do you understand? Uncompleted projects or projects that have been abandoned, and the continent just seems to sink into poverty. So when you have an issue, a pandemic like COVID or anything else, or a disaster, then because we are the most vulnerable, then in many ways we are also the most affected. And so I set out, and I began to realize that things were changing. There was a new paradigm shift, and the conversation was different, and people were looking at impact investing, social entrepreneurship, business, etc., etc. And so I decided to also move in that direction, and that led me to start Social Innovation Africa, which straddles both the non-profit side but also looks at the for-profit side. And it's a new model of development that I'm hoping that we can be a model and a think tank, really, to bring out these learnings and share experiences, etc., in terms of how we do things a little bit differently the African way.
I mean, that's interesting to know. Particularly, I'm aware that you had your tertiary education in the UK and subsequently relocated back to Sub-Saharan Africa to, get involved in development work. Now, you mentioned something which I think I would just want us to just take a cursory glance at, before we continue.
Okay.
And you mentioned the issue of uncompleted projects in the non-profit space.
Yes.
So what would we say at this point in time, it's obvious that governments are not the only culprits in the retardation of development across sub-Saharan Africa. Or what do you have to say to that? Because you have a situation where, obviously non-profits may not have given, a good account of themselves according to some studies.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a lot of good work that has been done by non-profits.
Okay.
But that is for the short term,
right?
It's not for the long term. And
okay.
So we have been using a model that is supposed to be a short term.
Okay.
So, you have war, you need to get supplies out to people, logistics, etc. So in the short term, those things work. But in the long term, there needs to be a more sustainable approach. So I agree with you. And the reason why government projects and civil society and NGOism for me has not worked is because it's we are using a model that is not sustainable, period. The model is
when you say it's not sustainable, what exactly do you mean, please?
Because it's a dependency model. It's dependent on funding and aid, etc. So even the way it's designed in a way to respond to what a donor prioritizes, which is their money, so they're entitled to do that. Right. It's not done on the basis of any feasibility studies, etc. Even if the feasibility studies are done or the baselines are done, it's done according to how a certain particular group of people want to move and where they want to go, etc. So when you are dependent, then you cannot dictate the pace of your own development. So that has been the issue. And of course, people funding you, people investing in you only lasts for so long. So you have these short-term projects.
But let me interject at this point. Anatu, you must be aware that in the developed world, we still have, the same things that go on here in the non-profit. I mean, and that's talking about provision of aid.
Yeah.
Donor funding, provision of aid, either from private or from public sectors, seem to form a considerable amount of both financial and material inputs into the dynamics of development, even in the developed world.
Yeah.
So, I think I'm a bit. I want you to, closely address that particular situation where you say, from what you've just said, it's like it has not helped us in any way, because you mentioned something about the dependency syndrome.
Yes.
So, would you think that it actually has to do with the building of a dependency syndrome, or it's actually the recipients of these aids, who have not been able to translate them into sustainable projects or programs, or for that matter, ongoing development concerns in sub-Saharan Africa?
Absolutely. I think I defer to the second one.
Yeah.
Where as recipients, it doesn't matter what somebody gives you.
Right.
And there's only so much hand-holding that somebody can do. You need to have the wisdom and the strategy in place to understand that this is not going to last forever. And this is just to kickstart something.
Right.
But I want to also correct the fact that although aid is valid, it's in the developing world, and they also, it's actually their money. So their programs, everything, there's a strategy to it. So it's part of their national development strategy. Philanthropy, etc., are all part of a system that work together to, provide and make life, create social safety nets, etc. But for us, it's not like that. And so that's where I think the difference is, where it's just thrown at us or it's given to us. And we have not been able to utilize or translate it into meaningful.
Let me ask you, would you not think that the issues might lie at the doorsteps of the recipients here in sub-Saharan Africa?
Absolutely.
To the extent that education and entrepreneurial training, and then, sometimes basic skills in project management,
I agree,
could actually, change the game or turn the game, to our benefit in this part of the world.
I agree with you on that, but I think the challenge is if you spend at least the amount of time that people like me have spent in civil society and around, you realize that the model is wrong in the sense that it only looks at that receiving dependency aspect. Yeah. And that is not really any fault of anybody's except ours, because at the end of the day, you can say what you can blame colonialism, etc. You are the one in the position to take this money and turn it into something profitable. So I think somewhere along the way, although our ancestors were very entrepreneurial, we hear of Mansa Musa and all the great things that they did, that has somehow not been transmitted in the last 100 or 200 years, or how many amounts of centuries. Well, we have this
Anatu, you are making a serious allegation.
I am, and I'm ready to back it.
If you say our ancestors were more entrepreneurially developed than we are today, then that calls a lot of.
I think at the time there was a system where it was more of a cottage industry, TVET type of skills in ancient Africa.
Right.
And if you look at even the Igbo apprenticeship system, it's more practical than what we have now.
Right.
So now we have a system of education where everybody goes to get educated, but that doesn't necessarily translate into what the job market globally needs. So you find that the African is always behind in some way or the other, in the way he's thinking, the way he's developing. Right. So I am one person who says that there's nothing wrong with the African, but there's something very wrong with his education and the information that he's receiving. To turn him out to become a global citizen or a futuristic person who understands and is able to grasp a whole lot of issue and integrate all his problems and find solutions. So that's where I think the challenge is.
You see, I would want to say that you speak authoritatively about the Sub-Saharan African question. I would just like you to share with our viewers, how many countries have you worked in Sub-Saharan Africa?
At least 20. And then I've visited about, well, not in Sub-Saharan Africa, but globally about 50.
About 50?
Yeah, and some of them multiple times.
So viewers, you can imagine that we're actually talking to a lady of great experience in the development space. And by that, I think we can take, her word, having done so much in Sub-Saharan Africa. I'm aware, that she's done, projects like the SARG in Sierra Leone with DFID, WASH, in 4 countries in West Africa with USAID. She's done, a program on gender-focused war zone rape in the DRC also. Currently, I believe you're undertaking the Women's Entrepreneurship and Livelihoods Initiative, the Post-COVID Recovery Program.
Yes.
That's in Tamale, I believe.
In Tamale, Volta region, and also in Senegal, just outside
in the
Dakar.
Volta region and also in Senegal. Yes, you mentioned Dakar quite a lot recently, and you also did the big ideas for children in Ethiopia under the Foundation. Yeah. I mean, such a formidable portfolio of development work, and I think that you really have a lot, to share with us today. Now let's look at this. I mean, you've mentioned the fact that you are a social innovator.
Yeah.
And that also, I believe, is the process of developing and deploying effective solutions to challenging and often, systemic social and environmental issues in support of social progress generally.
Yeah.
That is what you do.
Yeah.
And of course, under social innovation, we have the environment, we have equality, we have empowerment, then of course we have community.
Yeah.
So now in these 4 areas of social innovation, I mean, which of them, have you been operating?
I think recently, all of them, but gender is one, and also entrepreneurship and livelihoods.
Okay.
So that's
for gender, that would be equality.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Equality, but all of them are integrated because when you come into the community, so for instance, you cannot start anything until you have water.
Right.
So you may not necessarily be on a WASH program. It may be a nutrition program, but you need water and to ensure that people have good sanitation, etc. So what the world has come away from is this singular silo approach of solving just one problem. Yes, there might be a particular focus, but it has come to a recognition that the issues are all the same.
Right.
When you come, so it has to be an integrated approach. So I've always worked in tandem with all these areas, especially in the last 10 years. Because if you don't take care of those things and you don't take care of the community needs and soft approaches, you're not going to get anywhere with people. So it's a very imperative that we have that holistic mindset when we try and enter.
Would you say that social innovation, as it were, is the answer to Sub-Saharan Africa's
Oh, definitely.
Developmental issues?
Yes.
And how strong will you say that will impact?
Okay. I mean, you mentioned something that I loved. We said, I speak authoritatively.
Right.
And, yes, as a feminist, I would say that.
Right.
Yes,
You're a feminist?
Yes, I am.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
You tell us more about that.
Yes, I will. Actually, I would say it is everything. And when I talk about that, it's not just the approach of social innovation. It's actually implementing innovation. One of the things, when I move into rural areas, and I've always worked on the field, etc., it's a certain lack of diversification. So even in terms of the programs we do, they're the same. In terms of sustainability, it's always the same, and there's always only one thing. So, for instance, I've been working in northern Ghana, and when I got around and looked at the food value chain as a low-hanging fruit for which post-COVID it was easy to get women back into work and And one of the things that you have is that you have a value chain where everybody's doing the same thing. So the issue of innovation, and I tell people all the time, when you have a really good product, we all watch these programs, Dragon's Den, etc., that people are excited about.
Right.
It doesn't matter where you are, you find yourself.
Right.
Yes, you may need some training, you may need some sorting, and but people will come looking for you if you have that idea, and they will help you, to create it. So my question has been, where are Africa's innovators? Where are Mark Zuckerbergs? Where are our, people who can create Ford, etc., and then end up employing a whole lot of people. Not everybody will be an entrepreneur, but who are going to create the factories of the future, and who are going to come out with indigenous products that are actually competitive on the global market. And then that's what creates jobs, and that is what gives us hope. And out of jobs, you can have insurance, a better lifestyle, social safety nets, etc. So I think that without this innovation, if we're going to do the same thing, everybody doing the same kind of black soap, everybody doing the same kind of food products, everybody coming up with something that's not innovative, then we are going to remain behind. And I think that's very sad, given the fact that we are a continent that has been so blessed, and everybody would acknowledge the fact that Africa has the most diverse in terms of materials, minerals, etc., etc. But somehow those are not being translated into actual products that are globally competitive, and I have a problem with that.
Well, a certain study or available statistics indicate that close to 55% or more of the world's natural resources and arable land, is in Africa. Yeah. But Africa only contributes about 2.5% to world trade. Yeah. I mean, so that is speaking to the fact you've just raised. And I believe, that the issues you've just raised about the lack of informed and educated abilities to transform our commodities, our raw materials, into world-class products. Yeah. That basically is what is keeping us out of the world game.
Absolutely.
So as a social innovator, I've been to your office at Tamale, and I think I was really bowled over by the number of products I saw there, which some of your, would I call them mentees or members of your incubator program, system or program for that matter, and I think in looking at the array of those products, I would want to say that if they have the opportunity, to meet with probably angel investors, venture capitalists, some form of informed aid, in cash and in kind, I think that those will be the building blocks of getting them off the ground. And then taking it further, they need to be able to showcase their products to the world. Yeah. I always, you remember when we discussed the first time, I said something about the Chinese example. And I believe so much that, like China, until the 80s, they had to virtually come out of China to exhibit their goods and the things they were producing all over the world, trying to get the world interested in them. But today, you virtually have to go to the fairs in China, to participate in them. So how do you think that for example, let's use your mentees as, a good example. And if I may ask, how many of such budding entrepreneurs have been directly impacted by your program in Tamale?
In Tamale, I would say close to 150.
150.
In Senegal, we used a different model where we're working with a cooperative,
okay,
aromatherapy, and there were 2,000 women
okay,
involved there. And in Volta region, we also work with palm oil,
okay,
cooperative,
right.
50 of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
And standing on that, what would you immediately prescribe as the way forward to getting these budding entrepreneurs, mentees, and members of your process, to where you think, they should be?
I think there needs to be a support program,
yeah,
which educates them the right way. Like there's a target for business, there's certain outcomes that you expect from business incubation at a certain level.
Right.
And I think that there are these entrepreneurs who exist, who have innovations, who are hungry, who are ready to learn. So if there's a system that is able to take these young people through all the steps that they need to take and end up with a competitive product, and then hopefully, if possible, link them to funders, investors, angel investors, etc. But that is not so much the focus as actually getting them to that world-class ability.
Okay.
Because I believe that once you have that, then it's easy to somebody to find you,
right,
and even create a local value chain.
Okay.
And so the supporting that process and supporting entrepreneurs so that we come out with top entrepreneurs, because the way entrepreneurship is done, at least here in this country and many sub-Saharan African countries, it's not a one-week program where you go and you said, 3-day workshop and then you are now an entrepreneur. No, there's a whole lot around mentorship. Do you even understand the commodity, the value chain that, have you looked at value addition? Have you explored these various areas? Is there the support in terms of, I talked about mentorship, I talked about building the real capacity and even looking at their specific needs. Yeah. So you have the general needs that somebody comes into an incubator that they have, but what is their personal weakness? Yeah. What do they need? And also the use of IT, etc., etc. So what it really takes is a program that is really dedicated of saying that for 1, 2, 3 years, we are going to grow this crop of entrepreneurs. And because we're going to grow them...
How will that be done? Under what auspices will that be done? How would, what would you prescribe? Because you understand what the issues are.
Yes.
Now, I ask you to prescribe, a pragmatic and workable solution. All right, because as a social innovator, it's all about, providing solutions or designing solutions, as it were. So what would you at this point in time, prescribe exactly, under what vehicles,
okay,
or rather under what auspices or approved mechanism would these budding entrepreneurs be transformed into the levels and the types who can take, like you said, become the Mark Zuckerbergs and become the Bill Gates, and because I believe that we have all those talents here.
Absolutely.
So Anatu, you with your experience, having worked through 20 or more sub-Saharan African countries, could you just tell us what you prescribe in clear terms? Okay,
that's a very, very important question.
Right.
I think what I'll describe is on different levels. So first of all, let's also look at the practical aspects of it. Okay. And what are the low-hanging fruits, okay, if we were to start such a thing? And I've always said food. Food is the beginning.
That's the agri sector.
The agri sector and agribusiness.
Right.
First of all, it doesn't cost that much to scale an entrepreneur in that area. You can be as innovative and creative. There's a demand. People need to eat. They have a desire for snacks. They have a desire for creams, cosmetics, etc. So looking at the food sector and also cosmetics. And the reason why I say these are two big sectors. I think the premium cream industry alone last year was 2.7 billion. So we all know that, yes, globally. So food, cosmetics, and also fashion. These are the three that you can start with and looking at it. And then you
food,
can also,
cosmetics, and fashion.
Yes.
Okay.
So these are things that are always in demand, and always, you can never have too many tailors or too many dressmakers or too many cosmetics. These are practical things. So looking at those. Now, when you have those, you can also start, even if you wanted to just, buy the food. You see, there needs to be a system where our young people are coming out of a university straight into the job market. And so such a system which is looking at maybe food graduates, agri-nutrition or agribusiness graduates, just because they have the fundamental skills that it takes to, they've learned and they already know what food certification, etc., etc. So you don't have that, and begin with people like that, people from the the fashion, who have studied fashion, whether at school or through, you know, these specialized colleges and school. So you take them and they have this minimum viable products because they are supposed to graduate from these universities or these schools with some kind of products that they've done. So you take that and then you now build this course around them. And the reason why I suggest that you use students is that first of all, the student is already studying something because they want to study it, at least most of the time. So they have the knowledge, you know, so it's not now that you're going to teach them this and that and what food, you know, standards are, etc., etc. So that gives you an informed group of people with which to start. And the certain discipline after somebody has gone through 4 years, they've learned, they are sensitive, you know, so they're able to relate and speak on that issue. So I think if we look at these three sectors for a start, people will talk about IT, tech, but I think it cuts across. But one of the problems I have with tech is that it takes a lot to scale anybody in the area of tech. So although I'm very, very also inclined towards tech, etc., I think that the agribusiness sector is a low-hanging fruit. There's so much that you can do with even just food that is rotten, food that is, you know, in Senegal, with the products that we make, some of them have been using fruit that are decomposing, etc., natural, organic, you know, and there's a demand for that. So taking those ones and then really coming out with this variety of products, like I mentioned, that are just beautiful, lovely to look at, very culturally appropriate and reflective of where people come from and what they are doing. So if, for instance, you were to do a honey from Savannah region, it would be different from a honey from, say, Upper East or Upper West, because the terrain is different. And we are not using that kind of indigenous knowledge and, you know, to sell our products and to drive, you know, so that we have that variety that I'm talking about.
Now, I mean, that's quite understood, because what you've successfully done is to speak about the potentials. But what we really would love you to speak about on Kukuza Africa today, you know, is, you know, how would these group of potential mentees, you know, be brought together, and in what manner and form, you know, would they roll out, you know, like I said earlier on, you know, a workable program, you know, to more or less grow them, and then, you know, translate their innate abilities into finished goods of world class. How do you suggest that this is put in place?
I suggest creating a unique vehicle or platform.
Which will be? Which
would be either a company or an incubation to work, you know, the model can differ. It needs
private or public?
Private.
Private.
Yes, private.
Okay.
Private, but also able to access or open to public funding, or, you know, but I think it should be private, because of the level of excellence that we want from it. So I think for me, it's starting with such a vehicle. Now, I'll give an example, like Stanford Seed, where you know you design a program and you have the vehicle, and based on what you're trying to, the outcome you're trying to achieve, which we are coming to project management, the whole program is designed around specific interventions and trainings and teachings and learnings and exchange programs, etc., in order to birth that in the person, or the, you know, so anybody who attends this, or anybody who goes through this incubator or this private company or a mixture of both, from beginning to end, it comes out as the star person who can now be the innovator that we are, the innovators of the future that we are talking about.
So what you prescribe in essence is a private initiative.
Yes.
Which would also publicly, possibly draw on public funding. To the extent that we're looking forward to particularly social impact.
Absolutely.
On the mentees or the incubatees, as the case may be. So this definitely will be a formal business incubation or accelerator process, so to say. Okay. And then I'm sure that there will be other processes which will be worked into it to ensure that the goods have intermittent product development.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So they need to go beyond how they the kind of qualities they bring. Initially, you know, to now step up their game, you know, to be able to make their products to become world class. Because if you on one hand doing your best to expose them to the world. On one hand, getting in as much funding as possible. Then of course the incubatees and the mentees must necessarily avail themselves, of every opportunity possible to make sure that they come out with better products than when they started.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that exists already, that hunger.
Okay.
So when you come to places like, whether it's Northern Senegal or Ghana or Ivory Coast or, where people are divided, you realize that there's a hunger.
Okay.
What is not available is the knowledge and the training.
Right.
And how do I get here? How do I, even you'll be surprised, like how do I even create a label in the right way?
Right.
How do I even go about getting my FDA registration? And sometimes, you have these schemes from government.
And how long will this process last?
I would suggest 3 years.
3 years?
Yes.
All right.
But at different stages.
At different stages.
Yes.
Viewers, all too soon, we've come to the end of what we'll consider to be the first segment of this wonderful time with Anatu Ben-Lawal. I guess, but at this time, you share in my enthusiasm, of having her, speak directly to the issues. We'll be doing a part 2, and hopefully we're going to be talking about much more. Sometime down the line, we'll also be doing, actual recordings from the field, as it were. There would be, talking to some of her products, as it for some of her mentees, and those whom she has worked amidst, for the last couple of years, so to say. So we look forward to seeing you again when we come back for our part 2. Thank you.